Well, friends, good evening, and welcome to CliftonStrengths 101. We have some friends who may be trying to join us online still, so we're working a little tech magic behind the scenes. We'll just welcome them as they come. But I'm Sam Rahberg. I'm with the grant initiative called Bridge Builders for a Thriving Mission. And on behalf of that project, and also the Diocese of St. Cloud and the Catholic community schools out of the same diocese, we welcome you this evening. Glad we could make some time together. I'll let Brenda and David introduce themselves as we get rolling, but there are three main priorities we have for this evening. The first is to begin thinking about strengths-based perspectives, and especially why that might be helpful to those of us who work together in ministry. The second is to use that kind of a tool to identify some natural talents or traits that we bring into these settings. And then to think about some options that are available to each of us as we imagine what it might look like to dig a little bit deeper in our own learning and discovery. So we wish you blessings on the evening. David.
Yep. I'm David Fremo. I'm the president of Catholic Community Schools in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I've been there since January. And 4 years prior to that, Brenda was my colleague in the Diocese of St. Cloud, the Catholic Education Ministry's office. We'll share a little bit about this inspiring quote, but more what's behind it. And if any of you ever get a chance to know me a little bit more, you'll appreciate when you see me with something that's been printed, because it's kind of guide rails to limit the extent of how much, because I'm very passionate about strengths. I love working with people, especially people in ministry. I think we don't get to do this sort of thing often enough, where we just focus on us and what we love about our ministry and how we want to develop ourselves and others to be more equipped to do it. So guide rails and also try to keep us moving along. So I begin with just kind of this prompt. How many of you have ever asked the question, what is wrong with people? We know what's wrong. We know. Maybe we do, right? And you gotta be careful in asking that question and what sensitivities we have, and being an election year and all of that, and without going into any of those rabbit holes. It seems clear. It does really seem clear, I think, in my experience, that this is really a prevalent go-to in our encounters with other people. We probably find ourselves either out loud as a joke, or even with others asking this question. Or perhaps at work, why does he do things that way? Maybe you've asked that. Or maybe I explained it so clearly, why does she keep asking me all of these questions? Why does she work so quickly on some things and so slowly on others? Or I don't get him. Or maybe at home. After all these years, you think we would know each other. Married 25 years, I found myself the recipient of that one, probably said it. If she would just do that differently, her life would be so much easier. This is my kids. Why can't he see things the way I do? Or perhaps I just don't understand how some things motivate her, things to do. And then maybe with themselves, what's wrong with people? Why can't I just get this done? This is so easy for other people. Why is it not easy for me? Or if I can just fix my flaws, maybe I can be happy. And in public life and politics, I'm kidding. But these questions, what's wrong with people, or what is wrong with you, or what's wrong with me, I'm sure they're not unfamiliar to us, no matter how much we strive to see the best in others or even the good in ourselves. I think, how often is it that this starting point moves all too quickly then to assigning blame? Why can't we fix what is wrong? It must be human nature. So, and I approach this really from the vantage point of Christianity. For Christians, it's easy to play into this very quickly. And I think easily much more than we would ever want to admit. We're sinners. We're broken. We're made this way. It's so bad that God had to die after becoming one of us, and in the process, find a way for us to get out because we're so miserable. But that process only begins with aspirations and commitments to try and overcome our brokenness, rather than to actually try to see it differently. And that's a very difficult place to start. And I think often that's a caricature of our faith, and sometimes it's even a starting point. Now, I'm not claiming this to be the core theology of the Christian faith at all. But in terms of an operative disposition, or perhaps even an outlook, I think it often does serve as a placeholder or a working draft, if you will, of what we believe about ourselves and other people. Something's wrong. We could just address that. So it's one thing to extend this to others or ourselves. It's one thing to extend grace, I think, to our others or to ourselves when we don't live up to standards or expectations or hopes or desires. But it's another to extend judgment and even punishment on others or ourselves. Or what we also sometimes will say is we just can't help it or avoid it in the first place. Why bother? So over the past couple of decades, if any of you have heard of the field of positive psychology, which I trust you probably have or maybe have, that's really what we're talking about. And this fits well within that. Donald Clifton is considered by many to be maybe the grandfather, if you will, of the modern field of positive psychology. He didn't invent it, but he's credited with an awful lot of the momentum that's fed into it. And so where we often think of the origins of psychology or the field of psychology, the vast majority of research in the field that focuses on disorder, right? Identifying disorders and how to treat them, or how to help people cope with them. Positive psychology instead starts with a holistic view of human experience, focusing on our innate agency and capability to see and choose ideas, practices, and commitments that are healing, resilience building, and things that contribute to greater productivity in what we want to do and how we're able to make that happen. Disorder, the natural order in us, and the unique order in us. As I said, Donald Clifton was a real pioneer in this. He taught for about 20 years at the University of Nebraska and later served as the chairman of Gallup. He began his work in the early 1950s. Since that time, his contribution to the field has really been encountered in thousands of organizations, from business to ministry, you name it. And this is the quote that we really are going to use to frame tonight. What will happen when we think about what is right with people, rather than fixating on what is wrong with them? What will happen if we view one another and ourselves according to our uniqueness, our giftedness, and our natural strengths? What if we celebrate these? What if we develop them? How much different would things be? And honestly, what would prevent us from doing this? That's the entry point for what we now call CliftonStrengths. And that's really where he started with this all of years ago. So I wanted to circle back lastly to one core element of the Christian faith that connects very, very strongly with all of this. In all of God's creation, humans alone are made in the image and likeness of God. Humans alone. Our dignity, that is our truest identity, is grounded in our uniqueness, in what God has brought to life in us. No two of us being the same. I offer this as a way of further considering this now famous starting point and recontextualizing it just a little bit to say this. What will happen when we look to the gifts God has placed in ourselves and others, rather than fixating on what we think is missing or broken? I'll hand it over.
I'm Brenda Kresky. I work for the Diocese of St. Cloud. I have been engaged with CliftonStrengths since 2007. And for some of you who asked, should I retake the assessment? I've been doing this. I have not retaken the assessment. I like the top five and have expanded it and have been really connected to actually those top five. And I won't take it again because I know too much now about it. I'd like to start with this quote God said to me, this is from St. Catherine of Siena, I could well have made human beings in such a way that they each had everything, but I preferred to give different gifts to different people so that they would need each other. It's one of the things that I absolutely love about CliftonStrengths. So again, one of the beautiful things, there are Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, a lot of other tools for self-development, learning about who we are, how we interact in the world. One of the things that I love about CliftonStrengths is that it is really unique to the individual. I love this picture because this is my grandmother and my dad and my youngest son. So it's a 4-generation picture. We all have some of the same like generational blood, all that kind of stuff. But in CliftonStrengths, you are going to find, we're all unique in that, but you are going to find 1 in 278,000 people who will have the same top 5 as you. And then 1 in 33 million who will have the same top 5 in the same order. So it really is when we put this in the Christian perspective, God made each of us individually unique. And this is a tool that helps celebrate that. One of my coworkers is an identical twin. They have the same DNA. So this is just another picture to reiterate that same kind of point is they have grown up together. They have been in the same room. They've been in the same crib. They are in the same field. They went to the same college. They have done just about everything. They've switched places in school. And they have different top 5s. So, again, it is so, God has created each of us with different gifts, with different unique abilities, even with the same DNA. So that's a fun fact. That's Brooke and Brittany, by the way. So we are going to start out with an activity. I would like on your paper to write this sentence. I use my strengths daily 5 times. Okay, it's like everybody's just about done. Now I'd like you to flip the paper over on the other side. Put the pen in your other hand. And do the same thing. All right, I will spare you writing it 5 times.
I had 1 dust.
Okay, talk to me about that experience. First time, the first one with your hand. What was that like? No big whoop. No big whoop.
Each one was kind of different though.
Each one was different. Okay. They were okay. Good. Good.
I got sloppy towards the end.
You got sloppy. Why did you get sloppy? Did you just yeah. Just didn't have to,
Didn't have to think.
Didn't have to think, didn't have to pay attention really, Yes. It was natural. It was natural. Second time.
I remember watching I have 2 brothers who were left-handed and watching them struggle to learn to write. I have a greater appreciation for what they went through.
Okay.
Great.
Good.
I remember, as I was doing it, I was trying to write well and thinking, come on, I should be able to write clearly than this.
I was pretending it was Thursday.
I heard some giggling. I heard yikes. I heard, like a huge sigh, like, or, and so what was easier?
Oh, that's
I mean, the first one, obviously, right? The first one's easier. You don't really have to think about it. You just start writing it. You just kind of keep going, keep going. The second one, I should be able to do this better. It's harder. I have to think. There's more energy. You did 5 sentences in a minute. And when I said, okay, we're not going to give you 5, you're like, oh my gosh, thank you. In the same, it's not the same amount of time, but you know what I'm saying, getting at. CliftonStrengths is about using our natural talents. We are going to be able to exponentially get farther when we can do something, we can spend more energy into something that we do well than spending time. I mean, it's not like we could practice, right? We could practice using our hand. It could get better, but how much longer would it take us to do that than just writing it with the other hand, right? Okay. So, natural talents. This CliftonStrengths is really about our natural talents. These are the things when we talk about the nature versus nurture discussion, this is the nature. These are things that we have grown up with. This is part of who we are from the get-go. I will give you an example. So, harmony is my #1 talent theme. And for some people, that's probably not a surprise, if you know me. But as I began to reflect on why I didn't like it at first, but I had come to love it, I've always been that kind of a calm disposition, all the way, even as a kid. My very favorite pair of pants, this will give some things away, but my very favorite pair of pants when I was in elementary into middle school was these orange, sort of, bell-bottomy kind of pants that had LOVE on them. They were like love and peace and harmony, and I would just wear them all the time, and I thought they were the coolest thing. So it's not something that has changed for the course of my lifetime, that these are all natural things that come to us. And so one of the assessment, what that does is our top 5 share with us after tons of scientific research and they've been doing this for years and years and years. These are the things that come naturally to you. Okay. Anybody else want to jump in and say anything about that? So, next slide. So, when we begin to see what our natural talents are and how they do more than make us what a unique person, each of us is a unique person. When we partner our natural abilities with practice, with our knowledge and skills, then we can use our natural talents in a way that helps us thrive in life situations. When we recognize what that is that we actually bring to any situation, whether it's work, whether it's family, we've got tons of family stories, we know how we interact with people, we know the lens that we see the world in, it helps us build upon what we already can do. I'll tell you a story. Again, here's a harmony story. One of the meetings that I was at, and I think some of you will appreciate this, I was at a meeting that could have been potentially contentious with the different groups that were there. I had a Latin Mass contingent, and I also had a group of people who want to ordain women in the same meeting. And like, how is that going to work, right? I listened to this group, I listened to this group. What are your ideas? What are your ideas? How should we better the church? How should we better the church? All of the ideas, brainstorming, put them all on a sheet of paper. We're all good. We're not solving the world's or the church's problems at the night. We're just talking and having conversation. At the end of the evening, the pastor came up to me and he said, I don't know how you did that, but that was amazing. That was my harmony hour. That's using my natural ability in a situation where that could have, it benefited everybody that was there. So when we recognize what it is that we do well, we apply it and into our situations. Questions? Quick questions? Any quick questions? Yeah.
Is there a certain age that you kind of are set in?
So we would say natural, our talents are, there's not really an age, but probably around 16 is when they begin to show up in a way that we use them throughout our lives.
Okay.
So, and then there's also times like, okay, like Terry said, she had taken the test a couple of times, and your top 5 are your dominant themes, your dominant talents. You take the test again, some people, 3 of the 5 came back the same with another extra 2. So 2 of them were different, but those top 10, let's say, are really going to be your dominant. My harmony is never going to be for 34 because it's who I am. So your dominant themes might move from 2 to 6, from 7 to 5, you know, in that kind of a way, depending on, you know, some people shift jobs and they're using more of a strategic talent instead of relationship building talent, you know, so depending on what you are spending more time fueling, I guess, that might be where some of your talents will show up.
I could see that, because over the last few years, in between, I had a real shift in what I was studying and what I was doing. But now I'm kind of coming full circle to where I was before, but
you can see how one might pop up a little higher than the other. Yeah.
And the talents, you know, what's fascinating about it is that you don't reach a point in your life where you're settled and prove yourself, and know yourself, and all of a sudden they make sense. I mean, they're all on, but they manifest according to context and opportunity. I don't know if any of you are fans of X-Men film series. My kids love them, and I certainly do. But they went through a series of these films and then went back in time and looked at some of the mutants. You don't know the X-Men, they're mutants, they're comic book characters that they built about superheroes. But they go back to the mutants that basically have some sort of a superpower. And the later films look at them when they're like teenagers. They're like figuring this out. Like, and I don't know if it's a power because it's a liability, because I could just as easily kill somebody I don't want to kill with this than try to do something good with it. It is so brilliant, I think, and kind of serving as a way of showing us what's going on in us all the time, right? I mean, some of our greatest assets can also be used for things that we would regret or that we don't want to use them for. And then we learn through practice how to refine that. And sometimes when it becomes a habit and it becomes so ingrained, we also kind of take it for granted. Or things that are really irritating to other people that we do. Maybe some of the things that drive us to move forward, and the misunderstanding is where the irritation is, and the misunderstanding of the giftedness of what that is. My wife's ability, for example, to focus on the task and skip through to completion. I'm bewildered by it. Not that I can't complete tasks, but I really have got to develop methods and techniques in order to do it a good amount of the time, right? I need to set reminders. I need to give myself breaks. I need to find a way through it. She doesn't have to do anything. She's just wired as an achiever. That's the goal, guided missile, get it done. And she's been like that her whole life. But looking back at her life, she didn't appreciate it the same way. I think that's one of the beautiful things about this as well. And it's usually kind of one of the discernment starting points for learning how to, even once you've taken the assessment, you've had a chance to name your talents. The next step is to really like start to think about them more in terms of to reflect on my own life, things that have been consistent, even if it was like the teenage mutant learning they have this talent that they didn't know they had. That was scary at that time. But I'm using it today in a way that's not scary at all. How can I harness it? How can I think more about that? How can I help myself appreciate it and help other people understand it better?
Is it, Pat and I and another colleague did this a few weeks ago. Then we went to lunch afterwards. Her name is Susan. And Susan had a strength that she considered a great weakness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember we went to lunch, she shared that, and I think with analytic, you know, she thought things were.
Yeah.
And she said, well, can you come out here like, yeah, but I've been here like 2 weeks. And I saw how thorough you are and how you think through things. And we had to write an employee handbook that didn't exist. So what we had was illegal. And that's why I asked you to do it, because you went through and you'd say, I think I know what this paragraph's supposed to mean, but that's not exactly what you said. And then, but it took her, but she had thought the whole time until she took the strength finder that was a weakness.
I can't tell you how many people, it breaks my heart and makes me joyous at the same time, how many times I've heard that. That I never considered this to be a gift of mine. Like who would think harmony is a gift? You know, there's a lot of times when we say, things like, oh, they talk too much, or they're too nice, or they are too analytical, or whatever it is that, they are too fill in the blank. But that's the gift that they bring. And I've had people say, I have to reframe because I've been told my whole life, let's say you have communication in your top 5, not to stop talking. Well, talking and storytelling is their gift. Being able to share something in a way that attracts others and being able to, clearly it's not, but it's being able to get a point across that is fun and exciting is a gift that those with communication talents have. So again, going back to the first quote, what would happen if we looked at what was right with people rather than just saying what's wrong? So going back to what your first comment was, we know what's wrong with them. Okay, let's reframe, right? Let's reframe that. Because I'm gonna see the world through this lens. You're gonna see the world through your lens. You're gonna see the world through your lens. Everybody here has a different lens with which we see the world, and it is different for everybody. We want to move into
Yeah. So a little exercise here, and just to ask you first to write this for yourself. And I'll give you just a little couple cues to maybe have a chance just to have a little discussion. So next to you. So the first is this: how can you describe yourself? Or maybe just better, describe yourself just in 3 really short phrases. You as you know you, or 3 short words. Not necessarily things you like, but things that are more about you and how you kind of engage in life and engage in the world. So I'll start with those. For the second prompt, give you a little bit of a to think about this. So when it says friends, think about it's basically somebody who knows you and who's really honest and straightforward with you, right? So we're not necessarily looking for friends who are just going to say nice things, but people who really know. So this could be a sibling or family member too, but how would somebody who knows you well describe you in 3 short phrases? Really, the next part of this is just to take a moment to look at these 2 lists, the observations you have, and just share a little bit with somebody next to you, something that you observe in what you said about yourself, whether from your own vantage point or as you see it from the vantage point of others. What did you observe? Happy to see the engagement. Just a quick question, because we're close to wrapping up. We'll get to stick a full final thought, but just to offer, how many of you found that there was some real difference in those 2 lists as you wrote them? Yeah. How many of you found yourself being harder on yourself? How do you think other people? Okay, that's just curious. That's my very unscientific. Oh yeah, that seems to be the case most of the time. But I think it's actually a really good exercise. This is even something that, if you can put yourself in the right, breathe, and come back to. I've come back to this one often, and sometimes it's a matter of if you know what goes into the exercise, you can kind of cheat a little bit. You got to resist that temptation a little bit, but it's good. I think you can do that. So I hope this has given you, if you haven't encountered the assessment at this point, I hope it's plant your appetite a little bit to maybe step into this, and then hopefully take a couple of steps further. We have 3 CliftonStrengths coaches here. We certainly know other people who are doing this. There are more than enough resources. We don't work for Gallup, no commission or anything here. We just kind of happen to be probably in our own way evangelists for this because of the power. I think ultimately that what does happen, we start thinking about what's right with people as opposed to what's wrong with them. I hope that that's something that we've all had a chance to think about. And I want to leave you with my little variation of this quote. And then you certainly have time for any final questions or directions. We'd be happy to help point to there to the best of our ability. And that's what will happen when we look to the gifts God has placed in ourselves and in others, rather than fixating on what we think is missing or broken. What if we do that? I think amazing things. So, thank you for spending this evening with us tonight, and I'm sure it'll Sam at this point.
Well, maybe in the interest of time, we'll wrap for those of you who need to make your way, but we can stick around and help with questions as you have them. One of the things that we've been convinced of as we've done this work is that a tool like this really is a new language. And so it takes a little time for us to learn the vocabulary, to become more and more familiar with it, to play with the orientation and the paradigm. So it takes some time. But lucky for us, those of us who are spending time with Diane this week will for sure encounter the power of narrative and the power of the stories we hear ourselves telling. Especially around belovedness. So this sense of belovedness and giftedness, I think, are pretty hand in glove. But one of the most meaningful patterns we've seen in our work as coaches is that those who use the report they receive to begin the journey tend to have a more sustained adventure with them, right? So the question is, what tools, what resources do you have on the adventure from here? If learning your top 5 opens the doors wide open, now what? So here are some examples for you to consider. The first and most important tool is that report that you receive. It's full of definitions, which give you a chance to look at how the research based definitions might compare to your own sense We use some examples like Dean's a person who was afraid that her gift was a weakness. Well, maybe that's a matter of definition. But often the report themselves will have vocabulary, recommendations, some exercises that you can do. So start by just reading that in small bites again and again. Might set aside a little time over the course of a couple of weeks, for example, just to noodle on that. On Gallup.com, you each have a profile associated with the email that you use to take the inventory. Poke around there because that profile is customized to reflect back to you your strengths and to show you little pathways through exploring your own your uniqueness. So lots of resources are there available for free. Brenda and David and I are happy to meet one-on-one with you to go over your results of the report. You've probably seen that email. We have a few slots left this week. If that's of interest, usually about a 45-minute conversation gives us a chance to talk through some stories that come to mind when you explore these strengths, maybe some projects or challenges that are ahead of you and what strengths you need to draw on, or maybe the people and other gifts you need to ask of others. Another example is doing a deep dive into a professional day, something related to strengths-based perspectives so that you can practice these themes in a particular context. For example, Brenda and David and I are leading an event on October 8th in St. Joseph called Navigating Change in a Strengths-Based Way. So that might be a kind of example of something that gives you some time to reflect with your report, have some conversations, maybe some coaching, and then come back for a deep dive in the day to one particular topic. The other option is if you wanted to host a workshop or some sort of a reflection for your staff or community tailored to your unique setting, that too is an option. Very frequently what we do is try to work with the language with the group to get on the same page and then try to do something concrete together that demonstrates how we collaborate. But again, the emphases are very similar to what we hope to accomplish today, right? Do we have language for our own uniqueness? Can we appreciate the uniqueness in other people and how that relates to our context for ministry? And then can we use that information, that self-awareness and that community awareness to really collaborate? There's a link there. We'll also share some notes with you after the event on related things. We wanted to close with a bit of a prayerful reading of scripture here with 1 Corinthians. There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different forms of service, but the same Lord. There are different workings, but the same God who produces all of them in everyone. To each individual, the manifestation of the Spirit given for some benefit. We hope you find yourself in that text and inspired by that Spirit in these days ahead. Blessings as you continue the journey.